Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome to this live stream. The Thinking Muslim podcast is very happy to facilitate this student led initiative to help guide and educate and activate Muslim students and student societies on university campuses. We have found over the last 6 or 7 months that many of our students may not have the adequate guidance or coordination to help make their Gaza advocacy real, or to guide their Gaza advocacy. Also, there may be some societies that have an aversion to politics on campus, and some have even shunned protests. In this special live program, we aim to answer your questions and worries about pro-Palestine activism. We have, inshallah, today a panel of scholars, legal experts, from students from the UK and the United States. The Thinking Muslim are very happy to facilitate this, but we are here really to facilitate this work. Alhamdulillah, there's a really good initiative on the ground level across university campuses to bring together Palestine activities in this Muslim space. Muslim Students for Palestine is a student-led advice network that will help students over the next couple of months with Palestine-related activity and advocacy, pooling resources and connecting student societies. You'll be able to access the material on a link which inshallah ta'ala will put on the screen a bit later on in this program. Now, before we begin with our panel, I would like to start with two great models. The Muslim students at Cambridge University, and of course the Muslim students at King's College London. Both universities have got encampments, and these students have been involved on a daily basis with these encampments. So I'm going to first go to our brother from Cambridge, and he's going to tell us a little bit about the work they've done, and some of the challenges maybe that they've faced over the last few days, inshallah. Let's turn to our brother here, inshallah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh. I hope my voice can be heard. You'll have to forgive me for the name and the mask. These are all relevant security measures relating to the encampments, but Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So I think first, I can't pretend as if I'm not speaking as a Muslim in these times, and we are speaking on the Thinking Muslim channel. And so first and foremost, the motive force behind the activism, as far as I'm concerned anyways, is certainly the Islamic imperative of fraternity, brotherhood, of helping out and doing whatever we can within the means that we have to try and support those who are struggling. The student movement that began in the United States and the subsequent state crackdown that took place was, in a sense, the catalyst for the wider student movement that's now spread to numerous countries and, of course, numerous universities across the UK. Alhamdulillah, in Cambridge, now almost about 2 weeks ago, the student encampment began, and it's been running consistently since then. Part of using the means that we have is to recognize that for the establishment, not just in this country, but also generally speaking in educational circles around the world, the Cambridge name holds a massive amount of sway. And so the setting up of an encampment at this university in particular, alhamdulillah, is an opportunity to show in a very kind of visual manner the position that we've taken as relates to the current genocide that's taking place in Gaza, and the general desire that funds that the university has are not directly complicit in those activities. As far as Muslim student involvement is concerned, this has been a time, you could say, of reasonable concern, but also a time, I think, for immense optimism. A time of concern because for some time, of course, we've been ailing under the pressures of people concerned, whether it's about grades, whether it's about revision periods, whether it's about just general apathy, unfortunately. But at the same time as well, we've seen an immense drive, Alillah alhamd, from some Muslim students from the Palestinian society and from other societies as well, to become involved and to be involved, generally speaking, in the activism that's taken place. And that really is what we say is a colored wajib. It's the least of what we should be doing, what we should be trying to do during these times. Thankfully, for the past 2 weeks at the encampment, in collaboration with those outside of our faith who have been involved in the encampment, there have been 2 Jummah prayers that have taken place on King's College lawn, which has never happened before, and it haven't took place. And the camp itself has seen relative successes. This can be seen on the camp's Instagram channels. An escalation took place where Senate House lawn was taken by those who were involved in the encampment, and the university agreed to begin negotiations on the term of the student movement. And a number of very heart-warming engagements have taken place. People come from quite far. There was a couple that came from Peterborough and cooked some food. They brought some food down. People came from different cities across the UK to show their support. There was somebody who came that was quite hostile and had a discussion with a fellow Muslim student in the encampment for some time, and eventually left and then came back with £100 and said, following the discussion that we took place, I just wanted to help out in whatever way I could, but I didn't know what food you guys were going to be able to eat, so here's some money and you can use it to purchase some dinner. I remember last week after the Friday khutbah that we had, I was walking through town and I was walking past one of the kebab stalls, and then the guy stopped me and he goes, are you the one that gave the khutbah? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, okay, wait here. He goes and he brings out all these wraps and stuff like that, and he gives me and says, take it to the encampment and give it to feed people. So that type of sentiment is very heartwarming to see, I think, on the ground, and it indicates that within the means that we have, we don't know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will do with it. Of course, there's been a media reaction, and many think people would have seen it by now. Sohail Braverman came down yesterday and made quite a fool of herself, waddling around, and she was comprehensively ignored. But it shows that there is, in these media circles, an attempt to try and spin the encampments in a negative manner, when the messaging is clear. I want to be clear, I'm not speaking necessarily on behalf of everybody on the encampment. I'm not any kind of organizer or anything like that, but just generally speaking, expressing a sentiment as a student, and on behalf of those Muslim students who, for example, even are not necessarily involved in the encampment themselves, but really warming things like I'll come back to the tent, for example, and I'll find that one of the brothers has just left some food there, he's left some water there, he's brought something. Can I contribute in any way? What do you need? Can I get anything for you, etc.? So it goes to show that even if you can't necessarily commit to staying at an encampment, there are many ways that you can show your support. And obviously we believe that it's not necessarily just those who are actively involved, but also if you facilitate activism in a positive manner, then all of that can contribute. So yeah.
And you said there that after your escalation, there was a conversation that ensued with the university. So tell me a little bit about your demands and the university response.
Yeah, so initially there wasn't much engagement from the university during the first week. It was various things were being said, but nothing too concrete. So an escalation took place on the Senate House lawn just prior to graduations that were going to take place today and tomorrow. And so there was a time pressure there that was applied. As a result, the university agreed basically to the meeting that was requested by the encampment and the preconditions that they were requested as well, relating to how negotiations would take place over an extended period of time. And that was done with the understanding that it's a prolonged student movement. But in a sense, every small victory on the way to larger victories are indicative, and it shows as well the efficacy really of just taking a stance and being active. One of the things for sure that's worth reflecting on, I think, is that without the steadfastness of the people in Gaza, this cause would not have reached where it's reached today. And it's completely unimaginable to think that 8 months ago, without everything that's happened since then taking place in Gaza, that we would even be having a discussion about the Palestinian cause, or there would even be an encampment in Cambridge, for example, and things like this taking place. So all of that's incredibly positive.
Barakallah. Thank you very much. Jazakallah khair, brother. May Allah reward you for all the hard work you've put in over these last couple of weeks. Jazakallah khair. And can I turn to our brothers from King's College? So I think you're live on the encampment now. Tell us a little bit about your experience, alhamdulillah, in these past few days. I think you started your encampment earlier this week, on Monday or Tuesday, if that's right. Yes, brothers, explain how it's going at King's College, alhamdulillah.
So we began our encampment after several weeks of planning. we'd coordinated with another university at a different university, so we kind of had some experience of how to set up, what logistics we would need, what kind of planning we would need. So a bit of a head start in R1, I suppose. So we began on Monday around midday. We had around 15 campers at that moment, organised time, organised space, and we all launched and began the escalation immediately, chanting, getting the attention there. We had media there immediately who recorded the entire launch and then uploaded that. Everything your previous speaker said, I can just echo all those sentiments. The support has been overwhelming, not just from fellow students, but staff and the public outside. I think what we all feel collectively is that for over the course of the last 7 months, all of us have felt so utterly helpless about what possibly we could do, and for all of us in many ways, and the students and the staff, it seems that a small opening has appeared where we can exact some kind of positive change towards this. And I think most of our efforts, while the logistics and the food and tackling the rubbish weather in London is hugely important, especially overnight, the key aspect has been about tabling our demands pretty much immediately from the get-go, so the university is under no confusion about what we're about, why we're here. The students joining here know precisely what they're signing up to. So we immediately put our 5 demands to the university, and those are the followers: that we demand that the university condemn what's happening in Israel, in Gaza, because they, over the course of 7 months, despite criticizing what happened in Ukraine within a few days, despite condemning Hamas's attack within a few days, over the course of 7 months, the university found nothing condemnation worthy at all. So we demand that they condemn. Number 2, there are significant boycotts that need to be pushed through. There are significant divestments that need to be pushed through. The university has all kinds of academic ties with Israeli universities, prominent universities which are complicit within the occupation, including Hebrew University of Jerusalem, including Tel Aviv University and Technion University, but also invested thoroughly within the arms industry, and invested not just within the typical BDS companies that you hear about, Barclays, Caterpillar, but have significant shares and investments into companies like Elbit Systems, BAE Systems. So the way we approach this, and we've been really alongside with the encampment doing our research and finding out what kind of investments they have. We also demanded that the university disclose all of its investments so that we can have a look at those and then begin making very pointed demands. On that point, we had a conversation with Norman Finkelstein yesterday, who's been to encampments across the US, and his advice was that based on the demands that he's seen and what's been successful, the most appropriate for him seemed to be the one at MIT, in which they made very pointed demands, didn't allow any vagueness to creep into their demands so that university could just waste their time or settle for something less. Very pointed. So we need to have that same kind of approach. Number 4, this university, we demanded that they actually have assist in the rebuilding of the education sector in Gaza. 80% of the schools are destroyed. Every single university in Gaza has been leveled to the ground. This university has a moral responsibility, being a self-proclaimed global university, but also to provide scholarships in the same manner it did for Ukrainian students over the past couple of years. And also because 2 people affiliated with King's College London, an alumnus and a fellow, both were murdered in Gaza, Dr. Maysara and Dr. Naaman Bush, after 5 months of torture and then subsequently his murder. And 5th, we demand that the university actually safeguard our freedom of expression, freedom to protest peacefully without any fear or repercussions or suspensions or anything whatsoever. So we felt from the very early on that it was very important that we table this immediately and begin pushing it through. We've shared this with staff. A petition went out a few days ago, and right now there are 280 signatures from KCL faculty supporting not just the encampment, but listing those demands and saying we back them on all these demands. Today we've actually submitted the letter to the Vice-Chancellor of the university and given them a deadline to respond back, pending further escalation, if not so. So that's been our experience so far. So what the previous speaker spoke about, but also the negotiations leading up and then planning further escalations from there.
And just a very quick question to you. Have you found that you've been able to work with other Muslim societies, other Palestinian societies across universities, say in London or across Britain and maybe even the world?
as I said, from previous collaboration with another camp, and that's been the extent of it. We are trying to build a network across, particularly American universities. I think we've got so much to learn from universities actually that have encampments running for over a month. We're still only day 5 in, and like with any kind of action or exacting any kind of political change, the same challenges appear over and over again. So we found the need to actually reach out to, say, Columbia University. There's a university in Netherlands and other longer lasting universities within London to actually communicate with them, learn from their mistakes, and learn how to keep reiterating the same message over and over again and getting everyone on board, because we've got a massive cross section of people coming to an encampment, while largely Muslims were involved in organizing and coordinating this, and still are. As you know, this being a massive humanitarian issue, has drawn the empathy and the pain and the hurt and the desire for action from the entire cross-section of the King Society. So that's something definitely we intend to reach out to learn how we can actually keep this movement together for a single cause until we meet those 5 demands that we presented to you.
Barakallah fi. That's really really great. Jazakallah khair for your input. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you for what you've done. I was down there a few days ago and I met you brothers, and mashallah, there's a really great Muslim presence on campus. So it's wonderful. And I think you had Salatul Jummah today outside in your encampment area. So that's really wonderful, alhamdulillah. I would like to move on to ask a question to our first listed guest, our first of our panelists, Shaykh Sohail Hanif. Shaykh Sohail is the CEO of the National Zakat Foundation, but also Sohail has recently returned from a trip to Australia. And I know, Sohail, that you spoke to a number of students at encampments on university campuses in Australia. Now, I suppose my first question is, we've seen some really good models of quality engagement, both at Cambridge University and at King's College. Why is it that you feel it's important for Muslims and Muslim students to really be at the forefront of Palestinian activism, particularly, I suppose, on campus?
Yeah, thank you very much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think, well, the first thing is we just have to really drill into ourselves constantly and perpetually the sanctity of Ummah, the sanctity of the relationships between those who say that there's only one God and Muhammad is his messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And what I often talk about is the entire Sharia is actually constructed to bring Ummah together and to keep the Ummah safe. Zakat is a right within the Ummah. And so we have to drill this in. We have to think of the tie of Ummah like the tie of blood. That's how the sacred law wants us to think of this. And once you get that point in your head, and the rest becomes quite straightforward then, because it's your relatives who are being denied all rights, who are being treated in the most vile of ways, whose lives are being taken by impunity. Nobody is saying anything. What human being, what decency, how can you do nothing? This is the first part of it. It's very human, very raw, but it has to start here, first of all. And then after that, we can build on it from our Islamic teachings. The duty of, for example, commanding the right and forbidding the wrong. It's probably our most foundational, you could say, civilizational or social principle. The fact that we as a community, because we represent our Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam, we have to feel responsible for the world. We have to feel we have a role in the world. And right at the heart of it is protecting the sanctity of Ummah. And so whatever step you can make which furthers this cause, then really as a community you have to take it. And the Palestinian cause in particular, it's because we have a group of believers in the Holy Land who have not abandoned their land. They are in their homes. They are right now being attacked. There's a duty to stand by them and to stand with them. As for the steps and the methods, all I will say, because this word forefront, I had to think about a little bit in your question. Very often, methods and ideas will come to people we don't have a history in. I'm sure I never thought of the idea of encampment myself. It starts and you think, oh, that's interesting. I wonder how that's going to turn out. For many of us, it takes a while to understand what is this? What is this item?
Yeah.
But as you see it growing and you see its strength and you see its potential, and I'd say it is the single most powerful movement in the world right now to stand with the Palestinians, then we have to feel, again, going back to just what's raw, this sense of embarrassment. How can we not be joining them prominently, representing the Muslim Ummah's face, because it's our family that these people are standing for? And so I'd say we have to keep the raw sense of Ummah. We have to keep this sense of a communal responsibility for justice. We have to keep this sense of a communal responsibility to drive the conversation to protect the innocent and the wronged and the oppressed. And then we have to see, well, what are the channels that are effective? And when you find a channel that's effective, it doesn't violate the sacred law, which we can talk about, then you have to join it communally. You have to. You have to feel embarrassed and ashamed not to be joining it. As for particularly on campus, the last point of it is just students have been, this age group has been and will always be the leaders of social change from the earliest of times until the end of times. The Quran speaks about young followers of prophets. And so it's not for me to old-splain. I was thinking what the right word will be. I can't old-splain to students. All I can say is you are our dream and our aspirations, and it's our honor to support you in what really has become one of the most visible, strong fronts of pushing this conversation forwards.
Jazakallah khair. I would like to bring in Sheikh Fuad Abdo. Sheikh Fuad is the Imam of Goodmayes Masjid, and alhamdulillah, I've witnessed Sheikh Fuad been very active on the encampment scene over the last few days. We met at King's College, in fact, when he gave a speech, and I know you just returned from a conversation with students at SOAS. Now, Sheikh Fuad, we've seen some really good examples in our from Cambridge and from King's College, and you've witnessed some amazing work over these last few days. But I've also heard from some Muslim students on campus that the Islamic societies are deterring, are saying to students that it's not a good idea to go onto these encampments, and maybe there are some un-Islamic activities going on. And I've heard even that some societies have said it's haram for Muslim students to participate, not only in encampments, but maybe in protests because of the presence of maybe some fahisha that may be around them. From an Islamic perspective, how do we negotiate these risks?
أحسنت. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. ثم أما بعد، رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Alhamdulillah, I'm very proud to be among all the brothers and sisters, and mashallah la quwwata illa billah. Actually, I was very proud as well to join the university, and it was really something to inspire you from inside. Mashallah, tabarakallah, this young generation, they would like to be on the right space of history. Your question, actually, subhanallah, I heard that question, and some brothers as well, they ask this question. They ask me personally this question. And subhanallah, with this answer, there is different part we should realize on. The first one, I think, is the mindset. It's very important to mindset. When you would like to look for the Sharia, you look for the Sharia as a holistic. When you would like to figure out as well, and you need to understand the whole principle of the Sharia. You can't take some element and try to build on it without you understand the whole Sharia. And as well, in your question, Ustad Muhammad, you mentioned something important, which is it might be haram, and even what's happening with protest. But when you ask the brothers, and sometimes, and you ask them why, and when you ask them the mindset, because sometimes there is a fatwa comes from a very respected mashayikh. We are maybe we are sometimes student of their even student. They are one of the leader mashayikh, but there are mashayikh sometimes in different countries. They don't understand. Is not they don't understand. Sometimes the framework, what's happening here in Britain is totally different, or it's happening in somewhere else. So it's quite important to start with. when you would like to seek fatwa, you should seek fatwa from some scholar. They understand the situation, they live the situation, and this is important as a mindset. It's quite important here, and I will keep the idea of the mindset. When you look for the Islam, you look for the Islam as a holistic, with the qawa'id, with the principle, the whole principle. Allah Azza wa Jal, He told us, كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر. You enjoy the good and you forbid the evil. How we will enjoy the ma'ruf, the good, and forbid the evil, if we not taking place and if we not in upfront line try to guide the others and try to deliver the word of Allah Azza wa Jal. Even when we look, if there is a small mistakes, that doesn't mean we should agree with it or we should take part of it. But if the Islamic society is not there on the ground, try to take part, try to be in the front line, try to lead, that's mean this fawahish, it will go more and more. And subhanallah as well, this is like what Ustaz Sohail he mentioned before, or Dr. Sohail, our Shaykh, mashallah, he mentioned something important. It's about a Muslim ummah. This is our part. This is one of the limbs of the Muslim ummah. In fact, this is the heart of the Muslim ummah. If we leave that limbs and the heart of the Muslim ummah suffering, and we think because we would like just to protect our iman, and we forgot it's to look holistic, I think that it's really, really dangerous approach, and we should be careful how we look for this as Islamically, because Islam is about the principle and you take the whole approach. And something else, just a small thing I would like to mention, and I would finish here. I don't want to go for the small details, but let's take this one. If they will look for the small details, don't they study in this university? Don't they come for the classes in this university? Isn't this is a normal day to day for them? Why they don't ask the same question day to day? Why that situation happen when you would like to do a great cause of enjoying good and forbidding the evil? That's the only time we have this the question. But while you're there day to day for 3 or 4 years, you don't ask the same question. I think this is something as well I would like to hear from them. Why didn't ask this question as well? Barakallahu feekum. Allah yazakum al-jannah.
Barakallahu feek. That's very good words, alhamdulillah. And I'm going to come back to you, Sheikh Fuad, with some more questions. We are getting questions in about the Shari'i angle, so I would like to ask you about that. But I would like to go to Dr. Ayo Khalil, who is on call today. So he's a medical doctor, alhamdulillah, and he's had extensive experience on campus over the past few years, actually. And alhamdulillah, when he was a medical student, he was very active in FOSIS and other organizations, alhamdulillah, and involved in student activism and student politics. Now, Dr. Ayo, I feel that there is a generation of Muslim students who, alhamdulillah, show us great qualities, but also there's a generation of Muslim students here in the UK who are scared, who are afraid, who live in an atmosphere of fear, and to stick their necks out, to be bold, to be courageous, to speak out is now seen to be a difficult task. What is the reason behind this, and how do we overcome it? What are the reasons, really?
I think there are different reasons. Assalamu alaikum, by the way. Jazakallah khair for having me on. But yeah, I think there are different reasons. I think depending on where the ISOC is, for example, there will be a different political sort of climate. Some regions or some universities will have a more hostile, a different political climate than other places. For example, if there are less Muslims in that area, if that institution has a particular history of repressing Muslims and oppressing them with policies. I think the number one policy we can obviously point to is the PREVENT policy. PREVENT does not always, so that's part of the Counter Terrorism and Security Act of 2015. It's one of it gives it puts a legal duty on public sector workers, uni lecturers, doctors, nurses, public sector workers, to prevent extremism, to prevent terrorism. And unfortunately, a lot of the definitions around these things are quite, vague or open-ended, which actually gives power. There is power in that vagueness, which means that the teachers or the lecturers can actually open up these definitions of supposed extremism. It's open to their interpretation, so they can apply that how they want. So perhaps if a student has particularly sort of strict or what would be deemed more conservative Islamic beliefs, then this could be seen as a mark of extremism. There have been cases if Muslim women start wearing the hijab, this is a marker of extremism. If Muslims become more political, this is a marker of extremism. These are things that can be seen as markers of extremism. So prevent does not always work through referrals, actually. I think the last sort of stats I saw were that about 60% of prevent referrals are come from those, I think, under 20s. So if you're under 20, you would make up 60% of prevent referrals. And I think the last is sort of a third of referrals are coming from the education space. And I think at that time, that was actually more percentage than comes from the police themselves, right? So our educational institutes, schools, universities have become places where people are, teachers and lecturers are doing more policing than the police.
And how,
right?
how, Dr. Ayo, can we overcome this fear that envelops a lot of our youth?
So I think that is a really good question. I think there are still within your institutional bylaws and constitution, within our legal sort of frameworks, there are a lot of people who have pushed forward and won important cases, which have sedimented our right to protest, our right to object to Islamophobia, racism, Zionism, for example, and we should use those foundations to push ourselves forward. And I think there is a strong tradition of Muslim student activism. Sometimes this has come from the ISOCs, but I think often, actually, in my experience, it's come from Muslim students who have broken away from some ISOCs that aren't that active and actually, taking it upon themselves, either through as individuals or with other political groups. And I think what is really needed is for the ISOC to get behind that, because there's strength in numbers. Right, and there's always a way. There's always a way to campaign, to advocate, to push back, either using tactics through within the institution or outside of it. But if you have, there are great organizations. Cage, for example, is a great one. Prevent Watch is a great one. There are independent lawyers doing pro bono work and advice. And at the end of the day, the last thing I'll say on this is that, as Muslims, there are so many instances within our faith where courage, fighting for justice is important. When we look at Surah An-Nisa, verse 135, stand up for justice, even if it be against yourselves or your parents or your relatives, right? That's embedded, the hadith from the Prophet ﷺ that says, whosoever sees an evil, let them do something with their hands. If they can't do that, let them speak out against it. And if they can't do that, let them keep it in their hearts, right? And another one, the hadith that the greatest form of struggle is a word, of opposition against the tyrannical ruler, right? These things are sedimented in our faith. These are the core aspects that a believer should have. We shouldn't be cowardly. We shouldn't be shying away from things. And, we often laud figures like Malcolm X. We laud, obviously, our prophets, peace be upon them, for their bravery, that their brave acts that they took. We laud our Sahaba, and they took risk. They all took risk, right? And often these revered individuals within our faith tradition ended up taking that risk by themselves, because the people around them were not willing to support them, right? And actually, if we support each other, we don't need to, one person doesn't need to take all the burden on themselves. We can share these things together. So those are just some of my brief thoughts, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair, Doctor. I know you're on duty today. You're on call, so
No,
you
Jazakallah
have to go soon. Just one very quick question for you, Dr. Ayo. I mean,
No, go ahead. Yeah.
there are lots of Muslim students who want to get involved. They want to
Mm,
be active, but
mm,
they just don't have the right form of advice, or they
mm,
can't meet other Muslim students
yeah.
and seek advice. I mean, how would you direct them? What would you say to help these
Yeah.
students?
So I think political education is really important. I think having, knowing the groups that you're working with is really important. Knowing the political sphere, how to speak to your senior management teams in your universities. How do these structures work? How do they exist? And I think, Muslim students for Palestine, this network that is being formed as a way to connect, especially when all these encampments are going on. People need advice. They have questions around the fiqh. They have crisis management. The crisis pops up and you need legal advice, political advice, institutional advice. So I think it's really connecting to those networks. And, for example, your sabbatical officers, if you have sabbatical officers who are on side within your students' unions, utilize them. They have more power in certain ways to speak on your behalf, to advocate on your behalf. Connect with past present sabbatical officers. There are any organizations that are around that are helping, FOSIS, MEND, CAGE, Prevent Watch, for example. These are all really good, these are people that are getting involved. And I think what Muslim Students for Palestine is trying to do is, where things are missing and work hasn't been done, or there are voids in this, it's bringing people together, in a timely fashion. So I think reach out to those that I've listed, reach out to us.
Barakallah feek. Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much, Dr. Ayo, for giving
Jazakallah
us
khair, yeah.
some of your time today, inshallah.
No, Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Can I ask a question to Brother Johaer Jilani now? Brother Johaer is a student director of the Muslim Student Associations of North America. And so I suppose you've got quite a good understanding of the equivalent to our Islamic societies and how they've interacted with the student encampments at Columbia and other universities. Just paint us a picture of what's the situation like in the United States, and how active are the Muslim society, Islamic societies in those encampments?
Sure, yeah. Bismillah wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. First of all, Jazakallah khair for giving us the opportunity to speak and inshallah share some tidbits from our own experiences here in America. I think that MS International, as an organization, our philosophy has always been for the last 60 years that our programming, our projects, and our events are going to meet every student at different levels, whether it's religiously, whether it's geographically, so on and so forth. So when we look at organizationally, what sort of the ecosystem is in America, in this larger movement, which is trying to stop genocide in Gaza, advocate for the Palestinians, and prevent further oppression in the Muslim lands, we believe everyone is going to have a different role. Whether, like you mentioned, Columbia University was focusing on certain things, Emory University in Atlanta was focusing on other things, UT Austin in Texas was focusing on others, whether it's Yale, whether it's Penn. All the universities which had MSAs on campuses played a different role depending on their context and in their environments. And not only that, in the larger Muslim ecosystem, we have organizations that are focusing on policy, focusing on advocacy, focusing on awareness. And as MSAs nationally, we believe that our expertise or our value add even in the Muslim ecosystem is having people on the ground, having an ear to the ground. And when understanding the interaction between MSAs and understanding the interaction between us and the Palestinian organizations, we can't understand without understanding what happened prior to October 7th. We can't look at it in a vacuum because there are years of activism, there are years of movement building and mobilizing across Muslims and Palestinians alike, which is a big overlap. Because when you look at the largest Palestinian movements in America, the organizations, we have PYM, Palestinian Youth Movement, we have SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine. They're almost 90-80% Muslim. It's predominantly Muslim by far. But the reality of the matter is that there are a lot more MSAs in the country. We have 600 plus Muslim student associations in the country. And not only that, we have campuses that don't have any SJPs, that have no PYMs in the area because of lack of population, but we have MSAs there. And not only that, some campuses have banned their SJP prior to October 7th. So all in all, there is a good amount of MSAs in America that act as shells for Palestine activism and for the student Palestinian movements in their city, in their town, on their campus. moving forward into what's been happening recently with the encampments, SJPs and MSAs and other organizations across our allies have understood and have prioritized that right now we will talk about only Palestine and no other issues that don't align with everyone's goals, everyone's sort of visions, and everyone's ideologies. So we have, one focus here. And not only that, during these actual encampments and these protests, organizers are very vocal about not deviating from the goal of demanding for divestment or calling for a ceasefire, increasing aid to Gaza, cutting aid to Israel, to the state of Israel. All in all, they're very vocal every 30 minutes, every hour. Like, we are here for the Palestinian, we're here for the Palestinian people, we're here for the people of Gaza. It's very vocal and very strict about it. And not only that, looking at the Muslim ecosystem at large, there are a lot of external sort of community grassroots organizations. You have Mass Youth, you have Young Muslims, which is YM, which are these community grassroots orgs that send people off to college when they turn 18 to go to university. And they have been starting their own encampments in parts of the country where there's no MSA or where there's no SJP involvement. But what's most important to mention is the leadership that has been kind of a part of this from the get-go. For a long time now, we've had multiple organizations here in America that have been backed by scholars, backed by learned people. You have American Muslims for Palestine, who is led by Dr. Osama and Dr. Hatem Bazian. You have scholars who have been involved with different encampments since the day one. You have Shaykh Sohail, Shaykh Omar Suleiman, who've been at the top universities, Yale, Penn, Northwestern, Harvard. All these universities have had scholarly guidance and scholarly advice from the get-go. And why that's important is because, firstly, students know that the scholars and Muslim institutions have their back. If anything goes wrong, you have legal advice. If anything goes wrong, you have Islamic advice. Every sort of aspect is covered. But secondly, the actual encampments themselves, we've been able to implement Islamic programming day in, day out. So whether that's 5 times salah, whether it's Qiyam al-Layl at 3:30 a.m. in the morning, whether it's having khatra after every single Maghrib with a guest speaker, whether it's having Jummah khutbah out loud on the patch of grass with a big speaker and a big mic, whether it's having Quran circles, other halaqat throughout the day. These practices have been implemented by the help of the scholars and leadership who are sort of giving us the advice, giving us the mentorship, and telling us what to do on the ground. And not only that, but dealing with the non-Islamic practices here on these campuses have also been pretty helpful, because for the most part, many people are very respectful of the deen among the non-Muslims, because they understand that this movement is being led by Muslims, and more importantly, Palestinians who are Muslim. So they show respect to the deen, they show respect to the salah. And one story, the first day I was at one of the encampments in DC, we were lining up for Maghrib, and as soon as the adhan goes off, or someone's giving the adhan in the front row, the non-Muslims start rounding up the salah. So you have a bunch of brothers and sisters who are non-Muslim holding hands in a circle facing outwards, facing away from the musallis, to make sure that if any police raid happens or any sort of thing happens, they're able to cover those praying salah. So there's been utmost respect from the non-Muslim allies from the get-go, from day one, to the basic practice of salah and other sort of similar acts. All in all, though, scholars have been giving us nasiha from day one. They tell us that we need to fix this, we need to address this, and this was the case day one. There was at the encampment, people were smoking, people were playing music out loud, but by day two, the teams of across the campuses of these encampments were very quick to make a rule that, there'll be no smoking here, no loud music, no gender mixing in the tents, things of that sort. So overall, scholars have been involved in this movement by telling us what is halal, what is haram, and we are internally grateful for their contribution. But they've also been invaluable help to tell us how we should approach these issues with the youth, with the students, with the encampment at large. And the last thing I'll mention is when brothers typically come to the MSAs or come to MSA National and tell us, or tell other Muslim organizations like MAS or YM and complain about, at my local encampment, salah isn't happening. What do? We tell them, go lead salah and start 5 times salah there, establish your salah there. They say, the food is being passed out at the encampments, it's not hand-cut zabiha. What do? We tell them, bring hand-cut meat and share with your brothers and your sisters. And the last thing we also hear a lot is, our non-Muslim sisters, they aren't wearing hijab, they aren't aligning with Islamic principles of modesty. So we tell them, set up a booth outside, a dawah booth, pass out Qurans, spread the message of Islam to our non-Muslim allies. And I can say the last thing is that the tangible impact of motivating and enabling these people who are complaining about the encampments to actually do something that they want to contribute to has had a lot of success. In day one, we had the circles I was mentioning of people setting up, circling around salah, and by day 5, day 6, many of them are joining us for salah. Whether they're Muslim or not is a different conversation, but they're joining us for Salah. And there's pictures of that on Instagram and social media showing how people who are clearly not Muslim and not familiar to the tradition were joining us in Salah. And moving forward, MS International and these Muslim organizations on the ground here in America, we're looking forward to see what day 20 or day 50 or day 100 will even look like for the encampments globally, inshallah.
I want to bring in Brother Mohamad Habehh. Brother Mohamad is from the organization American Muslims for Palestine. I know you've been at the center of some of these encampments and the protest work that has been taking place in the United States. And I suppose you echo what Brother Johaer is saying there. But what I want to ask you really is about the successes maybe of these encampments, because there is a feeling out there that this is no more than performative. You know, students go out, they sit on the lawn, they lie around all day, and they play music, or in the case of some of you guys, they play music at a very low volume, and nothing really gets done as a result of their activities. And maybe it's a little bit performative. I mean, how would you respond to such a claim?
Well, first, thank you to the organizers for setting this up, and hats off to all the encampments across the UK that are bringing awareness to what's going on. I think the first thing, Brother Mohamad, when we talk about these encampments and people talk about performative and how effective they can be, I think the most effective part of this is seeing how many people are talking about it. For weeks on end, it was wall-to-wall coverage on our CNN, on our Fox News, talking about how these encampments are starting because of Gaza. At a time where the American public, where the American political and even academic leadership have failed to talk about the complicity of the US, of these universities, with the ongoing genocide in Gaza, the students took that moral imperative to come out and make sure that the world did not forget about Gaza, that the world continued to talk about Gaza. And we've seen just from the media itself, we've seen how effective this has been. And we've seen American politicians, American universities, American law enforcement come out as hard as they could against these students. You know, we had the president of the United States, Genocide Joe, a man who couldn't talk, who couldn't use any harsh words for the ongoing genocide in Gaza, came out very quickly to condemn the student movement. We see how effective this has been, and we've seen through the members of Congress, through even some of the leaders of Congress, go to these encampments and try to condemn these students. We see how effective that we have been. But of course, it isn't just with this aspect, with how hard they've tried to shut them down, with how hard they've tried to get this off the air. We also see some of these universities have begun to negotiate with these students across the country. Universities have begun to negotiate with these students, whether it's in Chicago, in New Jersey, in California. We've seen successes where these students have given their lists of demands, and many of them have been met, to the point where there will be a session in Congress to hear from some of these academic leaders, from the leaders of these universities, to hear why they gave up so much, why they gave so much to these students. This is the situation we've gotten to. And lastly, I'll say, you know, at a time where we see these students coming out, it's important to note that this has been the history of civil rights in the West. In universities across the United States and across the world, we've seen that university students have always been the ones who have made sure to highlight these issues, whether it was during the American Civil Rights Movement or the Vietnam War. Students led encampments, led teach-ins, led sit-ins against their complicity in these atrocities. And this movement is just a further step in that history. You know, many of us look at the moment right now and we see that there are many people who do not appreciate these encampments. They do not appreciate the fact that our students are speaking out for what's going on. But historically, they never do. They didn't like it when the students stood up against apartheid South Africa. They didn't like it when the students stood against the Vietnam War. And they're not going to like it when we stand against the complicity of our governments in the ongoing genocide in Gaza. But there will be a day where people will look back and be proud that at a time where the moral leadership failed, that the students were the ones who brought it back, and the students were the ones who made sure that Gaza was at the forefront of the conversation.
Brother Mohamad, how much of an impact does this have on the people of Gaza? You're from Palestine. You have roots back in Palestine. I'm not sure if you have roots in Gaza itself, but how much are the Palestinians looking at what you're doing in universities across the country as well as universities around the world?
I think that the people of Gaza, at a time where all their universities have been destroyed, where their professors have been murdered, where they are losing so much of their opportunities in this ongoing genocide, I believe that they are very proud of what the student movement in America and across the world is doing. And we've seen this. We've seen pictures of these students celebrating, of children in Gaza, of families in Gaza, celebrating the successes, celebrating the narrative that is being pushed by these encampments. We've seen letters come out from student groups in Gaza, talking about how much they appreciate what the students in America, what the students across the West and across the globe have been doing. The people of Palestine are very appreciative of all the support that they've gotten from across the globe. And at a time, 7 months in, almost 8 we're in the 8th month of this ongoing genocide, at a time where people want to forget. The people here in the United States, the students here in the United States, are refusing to allow anyone to forget what's going on. In October, President Biden and those around him kept saying that people will forget about this. People will forget that what's going on. People will stop caring. But as the months have gone on, we've seen that the grassroots movement has continued to escalate, has continued to make sure that Gaza is at the forefront, and that we will continue until we achieve justice for our brothers and sisters in Gaza and all over Palestine.
That's a really wonderful comments you've made there, and inshallah we'll come back to you, brother. I want to ask a question that's come in on the comment section, and it's a fiqh question. Maybe it just requires a very quick answer, Dr. Sohail, but it's a question about holding Jummah prayers on the encampment. Firstly, the encampment is not a mosque, and secondly, it isn't. We're in danger of splitting the community when we have additional Jummahs. We had a conversation about this, funnily enough, in our program a few months back. But how would you respond to that?
Yeah, so there's a long and a short of it. If we went into the short of it instead, we can simply say that universities do hold Friday prayers. What you need for a Friday prayer is a reasonable group. The extreme minimum for Abu Hanifa is basically 4 people, including the imam. And so if universities already have Friday prayers happening, then what they should do is they should locate it in a way that works with how the encampment is working. It goes back to the earlier questions today about what I believe is the duty of Muslims to support this. You're on campus. This is your neighborhood. They're making a strong stand for your community. You have to support this. And so part of that would be, in my estimation, is the Jummah that already happens on university. Is there a way to locate it with the encampment? If not, and if there's going to be a second Jummah on the encampment, I'd very much love to hear Shaykh Fuad's answer on this, if I can ask you to bring him in as well. Yes. There is like I said, there's a long and a short of this, but scholars I've discussed with, they are happy, as long as you have a very minimum group, to declare it valid. And what I mean by that is certainly, the Deobandi scholars that I've consulted on the Hanafi fiqh on this. So I would be, I think we have to support what an earlier panelist mentioned about really the public display of faith and in this time. But I'm very much hopeful and happy for Shaykh Fuad to have a final word on this.
Shaykh Fuad, would you like to respond about this Salatul Jummah and the unity of Jummah?
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. Can I go for the question, go for Brother Mohamad Habehh as well? And I will come for that. I think you asked him something important about how the brothers in Gaza and the people of Gaza, what they think about what's happening, what we have done. I think as well, I'm sorry, there is one small, in 2 or 3 sentences I would like to mention. We should as well to think what Allah Azza wa Jal think of what we have done. Sometimes maybe the brothers and sisters in Gaza, they wouldn't know what we have done, but at least in front of Allah Azza wa Jal, have I done my part or not? I think this is important, just point here. Dr. Sohail, Allah Jazak Khair, I shouldn't speak between your hand, Allah Jazak Khair, for this. Allah Al-Musta'an. This mas'ala, and it's keep coming lots of times. Subhanallah, it's a little bit, I'm surprised with it. It's keep coming because in lots of masajid, we already bring 2, some masajid bring more than 3 jama'ah in the same place. The same masjid bring 2 jama'ah and 3 jama'ah, and this is coming more and more. Like what Ustaz Sohail mentioned, Allah Jazak Khair, we shouldn't split the jama'ah, and we all about unity, and we should pray together. But again, could be if we pray outside, this is part of the da'wah. Like what the brother he mentioned, this is part of the da'wah. Some people, they will hear the word of Allah Azza wa Jal, and the people, they will hear the maw'idah. And people, subhanallah, yesterday I heard there is in one university here, there is shahada, there is somebody become Muslim because of what's happening. This is ni'mah from Allah Azza wa Jal. Yes, we would like the unity, and the brothers, they should come together to pray, and this is what they should know, what they should do. If there is a little bit of spirit, alhamdulillah, some masajid, they pray more than one jama'ah, and I think, alhamdulillah, with a fiqhi, again, let's take the bigger picture and let's look at it for the bigger picture. Wallahu a'lam.
That's very sound advice. I would like to bring in Brother Mohamad Rabbani from Cage International. Now, I think Brother Mohamad Rabbani, we've been in conversation for the last few days and weeks, actually, about the state of the campus activism, and you've visited a number of the encampments. Maybe I would like to ask you quite I suppose a blunt question. From your observations, you've been to multiple protests. How do you assess where the Muslim community is? I mean, in light of what you've heard from Brother Mohamad and Brother Johaer from the United States as well. Oh, you're on mute.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Jazakallah khairan, Brother Muhammad Jalal, and all of our contributors, everybody's listening. May Allah reward you all. A few quick comments I'll make. I have visited some of the encampments, some of my team members, colleagues, they're visiting, and the overwhelming view is that, mashallah, it's very, very positive. The Muslim presence on those encampments is something that we need to work on. And that's why there's an initiative that's being put together. We've heard about it, and we'll probably hear more about it, Muslim Students for Palestine. But overwhelmingly, it also reflects the picture more broadly around the Palestine solidarity that we've been seeing since the genocide began in Gaza many months ago. There's a few observations I'll make. Firstly is, ultimately, this is part of Allah's divine plan. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to remind us of something, or wake us up from our slumber, or remind us of our role, our divinely ordained mission, He will shake us with some events. It might be in our personal life, and now we're experiencing it in our ummatic life, if you will. So we're seeing is many people are getting activated, and where they are, how they are getting activated depends where they started from. So if someone was literally unaware, they're becoming aware.
If someone was sitting, they're standing up. If someone was already active, they are becoming even more stronger in their advocacy and efforts. Second observation is that the Muslim community should be more present and should be leading in many of these spaces. We're not there yet, and that causes some issues. Allah has given us a divine duty to uphold the truth, to spread justice, to advocate for those who are being oppressed. Now, Muslims really should be modeling this. Unfortunately, we're not there yet, and there are some investigation needs to happen into why our community has been lagging behind and other communities are playing that role. And that does create some of the issues, some of the questions that we get is because some of these spaces have been taken over sometimes by people from the left or from a socialist or other type of lobby. So what we need is Muslims to become even more active. The third observation is the movement is happening at the grassroots level. People are just moving. People are getting up and realizing that I cannot tolerate what's happening in Gaza. We need to take action. Allah will question me on the Day of Judgment. I have the ability to speak, I'm going to speak. I have the ability to write or post, I'm going to do that. What we've not seen is we've not seen the same energy and same movement coming from the institutions or the organizations. And I think that's also reflected in the student space. What maybe some of the students were expecting was some of the larger organizations or established organizations to start mobilizing and organizing. And really, it's been a bit disappointing. So students have come together, Muslim and others, and what they're doing is they're just organizing themselves and they're taking action because they can't tolerate what they're seeing and just sitting by the sideline. The movement is happening from the grassroots. I think our community has realized also that the power that it actually possesses in creative action, in creative energy and organized work. That power, maybe once upon a time, people would just by default think it resides in Westminster, and they would just by default turn to the institutions in Westminster to try to solve the problem. Alhamdulillah, that is changing. People are realizing that the people in Westminster, the institution and system in Westminster is simply there, designed to maintain the status quo. And if they want change, if they want anything to happen in this genocide, then they have to actually take the onus themselves, take responsibility and take action. So the last observation I'll share is there's certain actions which we can call non-managed actions. These seem to be producing far more effective results than the managed ones. And our adversaries, they're very, very good at managing certain types of activism and political action. But other types, they just can't control and they start getting extremely worried. So for example, social media, huge amount of censorship is there, but still it's very difficult to manage. And the social media narrative has been completely won. Alhamdulillah, the truth has emerged, number one, through the steadfast struggle of our brothers and sisters in Gaza. And then secondly, through the world coming together and the Muslim Ummah coming together to speak and post on social media. Similarly, direct action, which is a very difficult thing to manage, that's producing results. You've got Elbit weapon systems shutting down, losing business, the colleagues from Pal Action, the work that they're doing. So that's an important trend as well that we've observed. And our community, what it needs to do is support those types of actions. What I'm concerned about is any mobilizing or any type of narrative that pacifies people. That would be concerning. So when we see our students getting together, taking over university lawns and holding these encampments, what we need to do is just show them support. And whichever way that support comes, we need to show them support. We should not be trying to pacify their energy and trying to divert it into some more managed, channeled actions, because really what will happen is the state apparatus, it can absorb all of that and eventually the energy will dissipate. So I just want to commend all of the efforts that are happening. We are Muslims, and therefore we need to keep our intentions pure for the sake of Allah, and we need to try our very best to avoid that which is displeasing to Allah. But we must not hide behind an excuse to evade our obligation. Our obligation of the moment is to expend every effort, time, resource, money that we can, that Allah has blessed us with, to try and support the struggle of the Palestinians.
Barakallahu Feek, Brother Rabbani. I want to bring in Sister Layla here. Layla Tamir is a research student. She's a PhD student, research in Islamophobia and Muslim campus activism, but also has a long history in engagement on a campus level, and was the president of the Students' Union at Liverpool John Moores University. Sister Layla, you've heard what Brother Rabbani said there, that there is a reticence, there is an apprehension amongst Muslim students to get involved, and maybe, just maybe, their non-Muslim counterparts show, dare I say, more courage in the face of this genocide. I mean, from your reading of what Brother said, and your reading of student activity and student life over the last decade, what accounts for this deficit?
Yeah, Assalamu alaikum and Jazakallah khair for hosting this space as well. I think there's this problem is multifaceted, and it hasn't existed because of and since Gaza alone. It's been a long time issue, which is what we're only now seeing the effects of. Personally, I think there are a number of factors. Dr. Ayer alluded to it before. The institutional apparatus that exist around us are there and designed to silence Muslim students on campus. So you've got Prevent, for example. I was at a campus yesterday, an encampment, and speaking to one of the ISOC members, and they were talking to me about, I was asking them what's been the conversation on campus in terms of what's been your conversation with the university. And subhanAllah, one of them told me that, the university have threatened to report some of the Muslim students to Prevent. And so the reason why a lot of Muslim students have been silenced is not by accident. It's been happening over a number of years. But ultimately, I think it's a wider cultural problem. There is the wider culture of almost quietism. Someone mentioned in a previous call I was in, the grateful immigrant mentality that our parents sometimes have instilled upon us, which has forced us to almost take a backseat. And that culture will not erode itself in a few months. And so that's why we're seeing a lot of other groups taking a forefront. One of the other kind of constraints that we've got, obviously, that some of the other Mashaykh in this call have talked about, are the kind of ideological, theological debates that are happening within the ISOCs that are making Muslim students kind of resistant to engage. Muslims, ultimately, we are a lot more easily identifiable. I'm a Muslim woman who wears hijab. I attended the encampment here in Liverpool earlier today, and I delivered a teach out. And one of the non-Muslim members of the audience was talking about, how can we support? We're ready on hand to support the Muslim students. We just need them to come to us. And it's really sad that actually a lot of ISOCs have taken the conscious decision not to formally engage. And so there's almost a domino effect that Muslim students are looking for that leadership, and that it seems to be a lack of that in some spaces. And that's due to all those other reasons around, a more long-term, wider culture of disengagement. Just be grateful for what you have. And there is this concept that a PhD a researcher as well, Maisha Islam, puts forward, and she talks about this concept of satisfied settling, and how Muslims just are taught to be grateful for what they already have. And that's been a concept that I've been using a lot in my research. So yeah, that answers your question.
No, Jazakallah khair. I'm going to come back to you and ask you more about this new network that I know you're quite instrumental in organizing. But I want to go to Brother Sagir for a second. Sagir is a solicitor and has worked with organizations like Cage. And I think you've worked for the last many years, you've worked with Muslim students and some of the implications that come out of student activism. Sagir, many parents and students fear the legal implications of protesting. We've seen police arrest people on these marches and protests across London, sometimes on the most weakest of reasons. I think there was a woman who was holding up, a Muslim woman holding up a banner that said coconuts on it. And it seems like she's in the process of, she was arrested and maybe she may be prosecuted. Where do we stand on a legal level? I mean, is there should we have legal grounds to fear these encampment activities and the protests that we've been doing over Gaza? Oh, you're on mute, Zakat.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Jalal, thank you for having me on. I'm going to start with, I was inspired by Shaykh Fuad, what he said earlier, when we were talking about Islamic law and Islamic legal principles that were involved when you're talking about engagement in these encampments. And I think the most important point to bear in mind is the mindset. What is the mindset that we need to bear in mind when we're looking at the law, whether it's Islamic law or whether it's the secular English law, which I specialize in? Now, as far as secular English law is concerned, which is my specialism, remember this. This is about a genocide that is being currently discussed at the International Court of Justice, the #1 court in the whole wide world, where it's been said that Israel is committing a plausible genocide. You bear that in mind, every single country in the world, signatory, has an obligation to take active steps to try to stop that genocide taking place, i.e. actual prevention, proactively take steps to stop the genocide. So that logic can be extended to individuals, whether it's companies or individuals, students, people like yourself or myself. What are we doing individually to take steps to try to stop that genocide? So when you got that in mind, whether you're protesting at demonstrations, whether you do sit-ins at university, it is about a genocide. None of us is profiting or benefiting personally. We are disgusted by what Israel is doing and what various governments like Britain and America, along with various corporations, are doing in order to assist that genocide. Encampments at universities are designed mainly to encourage the university bodies to actually disinvest their millions and millions of pounds of tuition fees and resources that they have, assets they have, away from companies which are profiteering from a genocide or permanent wars. Now, if you start with that mindset, then whether it's a police officer, whether it's a university vice chancellor, whether it's a lowly parental person, you have that discussion with them. Now, I challenge anybody to say, well, actually, let the genocide carry on. If you're wrong to express your opinion, you're disgust about a genocide, right? So that's the starting point, and that's the mindset I think everybody must have in mind. Now, having heard, mashallah, the students on this podcast, on your show here, I'm absolutely convinced that they don't need any legal advice. Mashallah, these students are really well prepared. They know their arguments, they've done their research, and therefore they do not need any advice from me or any other functionary lawyer that might be involved with all these fields. However, I do think some few things I've shared with various students over the last few past weeks when I've been talking to them, some basic advice to take into account when dealing with the universities, just to ensure that everything's documented properly, right? So what we encourage, and this will, from a lawyer or an activist or an organizational point of view, it will be important when we look at how to account any university bodies, authorities, which are unjust or take negative steps against those who are doing encampments. So we encourage students to open immediately a dialogue with university authorities. Document everything. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? Secondly, ask clear and reasoned demands, including transparency of university investments. Right? Record attempted disruption by pro-genocide activists. You saw Suala Brevman come down to university. Mashallah, she was brilliantly dealt with, just turning back on that, right? That kind of things are going to happen. You're going to have pro-genocide activists and politicians coming over, trying to get snippets of camera, and then they say, look, they've broken this law, they've done this and done this. And I would argue that the vast amount of coverage on mainstream media the controlled media, whether it's America, whether it's Britain, is actually designed to give the impression that these places are full of violence, and there's anti-Semitism, there's this, all kind of thing. That's complete nonsense. As one of the youngster brothers was saying from America, that actually the truth of the matter is, many of the university authorities are now negotiating with the students. And I've seen a number where they've actually agreed that they will disinvest. So therefore, the students' movement is actually being successful. It's growing. It's having an impact. And may I say, it's actually empowering university leaders who have to make decisions where they invest in their internal discussions as to say, well, listen, we have obligations towards corporate social responsibility laws. We have obligations to avoid environmental damage. And certainly we are being linked with a live stream genocide by investing in these particular companies. Now, nobody in the world can argue against that unless you say, look, I've got the power, I do what I like. Fortunately, despite all the restrictions, despite all the image that the media may try to give, despite what prevent wallahs or some minor sort of people might tell you, there's nobody is going to stop you from protesting against it, right? So I think having said all that, there is still concern. And I think as lawyers, we want to be useful, right? This is not a lawyer's thing, but we want to be useful. The laws allow you to protest, give you the freedom to speak against genocide for the reason I've outlined. However, both myself, many other lawyers are available. They are proud and eager to be associated and linked with the brave students, whether it's in Britain, whether it's in Europe, or whether it's in America. We are available. You met one of my colleagues, Mohamad Rabbani, earlier, shortly, talking at Cage about the kind of work they do. There's a numerous amount of casework support available, numerous amount of lawyers available. So please do get in touch, and certainly through yourself or through Rabbani, make contact. Any issue that you have, any inquiry you have, we'll be more than pleased to assist you.
Jazakallah khair. We have a question that's been asked here from someone specifically about international students. I heard recently that a Palestinian student, her visa was revoked, her student visa, as a result of participating in a protest, or maybe in one of his camps. I'm not sure which one it was. How should international students traverse the legal issues that come out of protesting?
Well, then this is a really important point, actually linked with international students, as well as what you said earlier about the sister who was being investigated for having a placard called the coconut, right? Now, these headline-making decisions are done deliberately to create a climate of fear. Now, what the police are doing, or others may do, is they look for any excuse to try to say, you know what, there's police involved, there's illegality involved. Now, it's one thing making a statement like we're speaking to an individual holding a placard for coconut. There's one thing saying, Home Office saying, we are going to revoke the visa of international student. Nevertheless, there are also lawyers helping these people. Now, these people will have their day in court. And I'm pretty confident that the courts will actually sort the attempts by the authorities to actually use this as bully tactics. So just because somebody's been investigated, just because the mainstream media has been able to deliberately create massive headlines, it's not the final deal. It doesn't mean the issue is complete. That's when the lawyers get involved. And I can assure you that many lawyers will be looking eagerly to look at legal principles and say, you know what, we want to test this in court. As it happens, whether it's prevent, whether it's counter extremism, more often than not, you will find in the courts, the government and various others, they end up being defeated.
Fantastic. Jazakallah khair. And there is an email address. So on the top right-hand corner here, we have a QR code, and you will see the link flash up on the screen from time to time. So there is an email address that you can connect to if you are a student and you feel you need to get legal advice. And the email address will go to the Association of Muslim Lawyers, and they're ready to help pro bono, free of charge, help students with legal advice. I know Brother Sagir and Cage and FOSIS and other organizations also have very strong legal experts that can help students in their activities. Jazakallah khair, brother Sagir. I'm going to go to Abu Bakr now. Abu Bakr is representing the Muslim vote, but also Abu Bakr has been involved with Canvas activities for some time, political activities on campus, rather, not canvas, campus. And Abu Bakr is a really prolific, mashallah. I've seen him on a number of occasions now, traversing the country. And last time I saw you, Abu Bakr, you were at the Birmingham encampment. So just give us an overview of what you see, but also tackle that direct issue, I think, that has come up. Why is it that Muslim students have not involved themselves in the numbers we've seen, as Brother Mohamad mentioned, from the States? What's going on there?
Well, on that direct question, I think there are two issues for us to explore and answer here. Number one is that students don't come into university as blank slates. They are taught from quite a young age, unfortunately, that politics is either a cause of deviance or a cause of fitna, and they want to stay away from it, or they are outright told that involvement in politics is haram. And I think people, they come into university with this mindset, and unfortunately, these are the same people that are elected as head of ISOCs or or who are committees, and they take advice from groups of scholars who also hold this opinion. And unfortunately, it is quite difficult to break those barriers and really encourage people that look now, this is one side, but there are others who hold very different opinions. Now, alhamdulillah, there have been a number of scholars who've come out and given fatwas publicly supporting the encampments, and that has been incredibly helpful actually when engaging with Muslim students, in terms of giving them the confidence to understand that is true, and that their engagement is not only acceptable but a benefit to the ummah and the Palestinian cause. And I think the second thing that we see is that unfortunately, as a community, we have let the state win. We have let we have let securitization methods. We have become a shell of ourselves. Unfortunately, we have allowed these measures to quieten us, to make us fearful for our jobs, make us fearful for our careers, make us fearful for our degrees. And most of the time, these methods of securitization don't even have to be enforced, because the government have forced us into a place of complicity, forced us into a place where our voices have become so silent that the job has already been done for them. So I think these two factors in the main are the challenges we face. How we challenge them, number one, is obviously I would ask every scholar, every imam of every local masjid to engage with their local communities, with their local students, and tell them that these encampments are halal and these encampments are places for real mobilization and real change. And secondly, I think most importantly is a project like this will help breed confidence in the student movement, that there are resources out there, there are legal resources out there, there are people who can deliver them training and really empower them to make a difference.
You're involved in Muslim Vote, but very specifically, I want to ask you about student politics, because it seems to me that there is a connection between the student political scene and maybe the national scene, and too many of our students shun student politics, shun NUS politics, for example. From your assessment, where are we on the NUS stage? Because of course Muslim students number very many multiples. We're probably one of the largest single religious blocks on university campuses. Does our numbers reflect in our impact at the moment in student politics?
I think what has happened here is for a period of time, Muslim students really did run the show when it came to national politics. And Shayma Dilali was the last case, and obviously she was dismissed based on accusations of anti-Semitism. And alhamdulillah, she has recently had a very positive outcome to her case, which was settled. And her rights to be anti-Zionist were shown to be a protected belief. But what I think of the NU as much as I think of the Labour Party. Unfortunately, these are institutions which cannot be reformed in the short term. That these are institutions that we need to challenge, and these are institutions that, unfortunately, for the time being, Muslims are unable to engage with any real positive impact. So the question is, how do we build our student movement? How do we build a Muslim movement outside of these established places like the NUS, like Labour, so that we can create a movement that establishes justice for all, Muslim, non-Muslims, those who live in the UK, and those who suffer from UK's foreign policy abroad. Of course, in the Muslim vote, we want to do this by challenging the Labour Party and encourage people to vote against them and the Conservative Party across the country. And in the student movement, I think what's really key now is how we can rebuild our student movement. How we can rebuild forces, and how we can bring together communities to really actually form a structure that exists outside of NUS. Because unfortunately, NUS faces a lot of external pressures from the House of Lords, from Parliament, from the Education Secretary. And it is in my honest belief that this is the organisation that really, even if we do get back in a position of control and power, it is unable to reform itself because it faces too much external pressure to be effective. So how can we as a community, actually, this is a really important question, how can we invest in Muslim students and give them the real opportunity to thrive? Because, we have thousands of Muslims, well, hundreds of Muslim students who are ready to be politically active. I remember when I was in forces and we were politically active, we would give hundreds of hours of free labor to the cause. But unfortunately, it's not a sustainable model. So it's really now time for the Muslim community to step up and say, okay, we see there is an issue. Post-October 7th, it has become very obvious that it is an issue. How can we fund these initiatives? And how can we really bring the best of the best Muslim activists out and ensure that they are able to be funded and trained to benefit the whole community?
I do want to ask a question to Sheikh Sohail and Sheikh Fuad about this quietism idea. But before I forget, Sister Layla, there was a discussion there about the Students' Union, about the NUS, the National Union of Students. And I know you research Islamophobia and structural Islamophobia and how there is this deficit for Muslim students when they go to universities. They face an immense a situation, an atmosphere which works against their belief systems. Can you talk to that? I mean, is it a serious issue that Muslim students face Islamophobia on campus?
Yeah, certainly. And Abu Bakr, just spot on. Just want to echo everything that he's just said about the NUS. I think the issue of Islamophobia on campus is again, it's twofold. It's what's done to us and what isn't done. And I think what we've seen with the NUS and the response to anti-Semitism and the investigation that they did over the past 2 years, and the way they treated Shema is indicative of a deep and structural Islamophobia. Because what is missing right now, since Shema's almost vindication in the past month, alhamdulillah, is a lack of apology, a lack of similar response in terms of institutional Islamophobia. And Dr. Shayda Nabi, I think she's watching this right now, but I'm really interested in her research on how the almost recognition and non-recognition of Muslims. We've got definitions of Islamophobia, definitions of anti-Semitism, albeit problematic ones, and none of Islamophobia. We have we saw with Ukraine and the response from universities there, and a whole complete silence of Gaza. We see even who's got a seat at the table. Last week we saw the Union of Jewish Students invited to Downing Street with 20 vice chancellors. The four things that they hammered down there, one of them, adoption and almost enforcement of IRA, and education, anti-Semitism education, which is fundamented upon the definition of IRA. Yet Muslim students, nor do pro-Palestinian students, have that same access. So what we're seeing now from vice chancellors, for example, is they're getting an earful from pro-Israel institutions, and UJS do not shy away from their pro-Israel affiliation. We see that these spaces are opened up. The University Jewish Chaplaincy, for example, just received £500,000 on the back of this whole fear of Jewish students. What about this fear, this quite legitimate fear of pro-genocide, people on campus, whether it be staff, whether it be student, whether it be external agitators, the lack of action that is done there. And that is, again, indicative of a wider culture of Islamophobia that is allowed to make students feel unsafe, majority so, who are Muslim, who are the most identifiable ones, who are most likely to be, obviously, pro-Palestine. And so the chaplain that was invited, that was allowed back after serving in Gaza with the IOF, the lack of action there. And we're still, yet again, hearing about this fear that Jewish students, which we know are Zionist students, who do not feel safe on campus. And so the question is often, what does Islamophobia look like? But what does Islamophobia not look like? Or what does how is Islamophobia not tackled? And it's that deliberate neglect of Muslim students on campus, which we're seeing, which is the root of all of this. And what we've seen with Shaykh is a huge example. So the lack of the current chair, the current leader of the Union of Jewish Students is the ex-president of Bristol JSOC, who were the ones who targeted David Miller, who was since vindicated. Now, he is still allowed a seat as a representative of Jewish students, despite in-court documents, it stating that there was no evidence of him claiming that Jewish students felt unsafe as a result of Professor David. Now, he's since been vindicated. Again, no apology from UJS nor the Edward, who is the president. So I think we really need to look at how a comparative and asymmetric response to how this almost inflated or this response or this claim of anti-Semitism and Jewish students feeling unsafe, how we respond to that versus how we respond to students interacting with people who are quite literally pro-genocide.
Thank you very much. Many of our speakers today have talked about this quietism. I'm not sure if it's the most appropriate word, but quietism maybe conjures up an image of Muslims who aren't that involved in societal and justice related matters. And there is a feeling that on university campuses, there is a quietist trend, this idea that Muslim students should focus very much firstly on themselves, on their tarbiyah, on their Islamic values, and not really focus on the external, because the external corrupts. I want to ask our two scholars on the panel today about this trend and whether you see it as a significant trend, and more importantly, how do we rebut, how do we address, how do we refute these ideas that pervade some of our Muslim societies, it seems, in the UK. Sheikh Fuad first, please.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allah jazakum khair. Subhanallah. Again, like what we mentioned before, it's a mindset. And subhanallah, that's a little bit, it's surprising approach. Because if we see the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they never been quiet. It is actually the opposite. We know one of the Sahaba, his grave, it's in Istanbul today. And the other one, you will find them in China, and they went and they deliver and they stood with the truth. And as well, Salman al-Farisi radiyallahu anhu, when he stood and he answered Umar ibn Khattab radiyallahu anhu, regardless if that's the authenticity is that authentic or no, but the general principle, the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum, they never quiet. And the Sahaba is the people, they have the tarbiyah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we could say part of the tarbiyah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to the Sahaba, it's to don't accept to be quiet in the time where it's need to be to say the haqq. In fact, the actually, and the doctor, he mentioned that, Allah Yajzah khair, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam say, "Man ra'a minkum munkaran falyughayyirhu biyadihi." That's activism. If you see an evil, try to change it with your hand. If you're not able to change it with your hand, you change it with your tongue. And the Quran, subhanallah, you will find Allah Azza wa Jal as well in the Quran. Allah Azza wa Jal, surah after surah, Allah Azza wa Jal, He told us you need to be active. You can't just see what's happening. what's happening for al-mustad'afin, the people, they can't defend themselves, and you say you can't do anything about them. In fact, Surah An-Nisa, if we go deep in Surah An-Nisa and we see Surah An-Nisa, it is about you try to deliver the adl and the rahmah and the justice and the mercy for the people they're not able to do it in any levels. So, and this has come after Surah Al-Baqarah and Surah Al Imran. And subhanAllah, even the concept of the Surah Al-Baqarah and the Surah Al Imran telling you, if you would like to have the leadership and the istikhlaf, you need to take the lead for this ummah and for the humanity. So subhanAllah, I don't want to take, because I would like to give more time for Dr. Sohail, and I know the brothers, they will benefit more from him. But subhanAllah, the Quran telling us you need to defend, and you need don't be quiet on the time where is need to you to say. The Prophet ﷺ told us, and the Sahaba, they do that in day to day in their life. After all of that, Quran and Sunnah and the Sahaba, yet we will have some people, they say, no, you shouldn't do that. Isn't that is just hadhu dunya, and this is the dunya, and ash-shaytanu ya'idukum al-faqr. This is what we scared from the shaitan, is not what Allah Azza wa Jal and the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam he wanted from us. Barakallahu feekum. Sorry, Ustad Sohail, take more of your time.
No, Sayyidi, Jazakumullah khairan. In fact, your last comments reminded me of something when you talked about the health of the nafs. I was with some students. They approached me. I was in Australia, as Mohamad Jalal mentioned. So it's University of Adelaide. Their ISOC, they call it MSA. They came up and spoke to me afterwards. And they were talking about, some of them were about, obviously, the things that we're discussing here, where they thought maybe it's better not to be part of the encampment. And I spoke to them about that. Then one of them said, we were discussing maybe it's better to give some money to Gaza and we don't take part in the encampment. That was the... And it's exactly what you've said, because that's the easy way out. It is very easy to succumb to the easy way out and think you're doing something worthwhile. And I just got him to start thinking about, well, most of the aid hasn't gone through yet because of political reasons. And this encampment is probably the strongest political movement you can be a part of. So it's very easy to succumb to easy way out stuff and say that you're trying to be precautious or trying to be careful. And so this, what you've mentioned right now about hadhun nafs, what is really driving your decision making? And very often it's laziness. And from what what comes to mind also from what you were saying, in the Meccan Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala summarizes the deen with Inna Allah ya'muru bil adli wal ihsan wa ita'i dhil qurba. Allah orders, what's the summary of the deen? He orders justice, kindness, and goodness to relatives. And justice comes before kindness, because without justice, you can't have proper kindness. And kindness without justice, you often are just perpetuating the injustice that many people are suffering. And so the Quranic message from the very early revelations was very clearly concerned with social justice, economic justice, the rights of the downtrodden. Don't forget the orphan. And the Sharia that was revealed in Medina, all of it is a code for justice. And so as a Muslim, we have to care about and feel responsible for the state of the world. Now, what happens is sometimes, and it's a fair and accurate critique, that if you have someone who only has activism and doesn't pray and hasn't been taught the manners and hasn't read the ahadith, then we get put off by that. That's fine. It's correct. But the solution isn't the opposite. The solution is to spend time in learning, and knowing that learning is really imbued in practice. And practice is to feel this responsibility that Shaykh Fuad was referring to. So just some reflections.
Thank you very much. Jazakallah khair. Mohamad Rabbani, there's a question that seems to be coming up time and time again today, and it's been echoed in some of the conversations here. And it's a question about working with non-Muslims. there is an apprehension amongst Muslim students, and I think generally in the community, with working with non-Muslims, partly because, you know, it is a real fear that sometimes we have to give something up. We have to give up maybe our social mores or some of our concepts and our ideas in exchange for a relationship, an alliance with non-Muslims. Now, Cage works with non-Muslims. You work with civil society actors across British and internationally, in fact. How do you attempt to navigate this minefield, if we can call it that even, or this the challenges that come with sticking to your principles as Muslims, but also reaching out to others who may share some of your objectives and share your views towards the genocide, but may not share some of your practices? Oh, you're on mute. Sorry.
It's a very real question. It was something that we come across in the course of our work all the time. I think the way you have to look at it is we are actually in a very, very unique position by being Muslims here in a non-Muslim society. We actually have the opportunity to be a bridge. If you look at yourself as part and parcel of this society, which we are, we're especially second and third generation Muslims who are settled here. On one side, we are part and parcel of the society. We understand the language, the culture, the political landscape, the humor, you name it. On the other side, we are connected, inseparable from our tradition, our deen, and our ummah. So that actually places us in a very unique position, in a position where we can create that bridge and show the non-Muslim society what a community that lives according to divine values, according to a moral framework that is revealed in the Quran and Sunnah, in the model of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So that would be my first point, which is actually it's an opportunity. It's a great opportunity. Many people don't see it that way. There's two reactions people usually have. One is they withdraw and they go inwards, seeking to preserve their culture or Islamic practices and so on. And the other reaction is those who have a good intention. They try to participate in society, and sometimes they can't negotiate the boundaries and end up almost diluting or misleading the wider society about who they are, what they believe in, what their morals and values are. So what we must do, and it is not unprecedented and it is not too complicated, it is maybe a little bit uncomfortable, but with conviction, inshallah, in what Allah has sent down and the example of the Prophet, with that conviction, it is very possible to navigate and present ourselves. And I'll just mention it in 2-3 summary points. The first thing is that we need to be very, very comfortable in who we are as Muslims, and we need to feel confidence in that Allah has given us this incredible blessing. He has chosen us, and this is a favor from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once we appreciate it and understand its greatness and magnitude, we will actually value it and try to preserve it and protect it. The second thing is that we should be comfortable in presenting ourselves to the non-Muslim part of society as we are, literally like as we are, naturally using courtesy and social conventions which are acceptable, but as we are. If we try to mislead them, we will actually get ourselves in a tangle. We'll fall into deception, we'll fall into also double speak, and that's not the quality of a believer. I mean, there should be truthfulness, there should be consistency. So that's the second thing. Thirdly is that you will find that when you interact with the wider society, actually people appreciate that more. The truthful, honest engagement actually will get you far, far more effective results and more respect than a more deceptive kind. And in the experience of Cage, I mean, let's be honest, Cage isn't just a Muslim-led organization that is, I mean, the kind of work and the kind of discourse we engage in is very uncomfortable for many people. We are defending sometimes the indefensible according to wider society. We are advocating for justice and fair treatment for people who the ruling elites and the media barons have painted as monsters. So even in that very difficult space, alhamdulillah, I can tell you that we have got huge amounts of support and access. If you reduce your consumption and understanding of society to the Daily Mail, then you will not understand this picture. But if you're actually in the society working in various spaces, you will realize that there is a huge amount of space and opportunity. And lastly, I'll just finish with this, Brother Jalal. You know, when I travel around outside of Europe, sometimes in Europe and sometimes outside of Europe especially, I realize actually the Muslim community in Britain has a huge amount of freedom. We sometimes convince ourselves that there's so much restriction, there's so many obstacles. But believe me, actually, we have a huge amount of freedom and a lot of platform that we can use. We have a very powerful voice. We have many institutions. We have many in terms of numbers. And our community is huge. I actually feel that we're not using the full potential that Allah has given us, and we will be accountable for this. That if we do not use this opportunity to actually do good work, make sure that is compliant with Sharia, and be confident in your identity and your values. And believe me, just leave it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He will open doors. You know, he'll bring you opportunities that you think that it's not possible. I mean, I'll finish with this. Look at Gaza. Just look at Gaza. How is it possible that those people who are besieged, those people who are being bombed, yet they are waking up humanity, yet they are bringing down the masks of all the hypocrites and the traitors, yet they are exposing the fallacy of many of those people who used to be calling for human rights? How is it possible? You know, if you see yourself as, you know, lowly and subjugated, and, you know, then you'll get nowhere. So what we need to do is take inspiration from the resistance and the steadfastness and the Islam and the Iman of the Gazan people, and actually try to absorb some of that and find creative solutions, inshallah, here in Britain.
Inshallah, Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much. I want to turn to Sister Layla and Brother Abu Bakr, because I know you've been involved with the network group that you've set up, Muslim Students for Palestine. If I may start with you, Layla, tell me a little bit more about this group or this network and what you hope to achieve from it, and how can students who are watching today, how can they access some of the material that you've put together?
Yeah, Jazakallah khair. So Muslim Students of Palestine, the logo up there, is a coalition, let's say, of activists, groups, you know, organizers, former SU, FOSIS individuals who ultimately want to draw on all of the themes that we've seen in this call today. We want to provide an answer to all of the concerns that have been presented around quietism, around legal support, around you know, what can we do? How can we be empowered? And so, you know, we've only been working on some of the resources in the past couple of days, but ultimately we've got three aims. It's to connect Muslim students across universities and share that good practice advice, you know, who's holding it down in each camp, how they're achieving their aims. The second aim is to provide Muslim students the guidance, the resources, the best practice, the templates, whatever that might be that they're looking for. So we aim to make it as easy as possible for them to engage with pro-Palestinian activism on campus. And thirdly, we would like to provide some, obviously, support. We have so much expertise amongst us. You know, there's ex-students, current students, ISOP presidents, you know, people across the student movement, current and former, who have expertise to give, you know, pro bono, who just want to do it fi sabilillah. They want to achieve and you know, support the encampments, offer talks, visit them. And so you'll find a QR code somewhere, but we've developed a link tree with all the resources that we're trying to collate. Now, it's a work in progress, but at the end of the link, you'll find almost a submission form where you can seek support. So if something's not on there that you'd like, just pop a request in there, and someone will reach out to you. So on there also you'll have legal advisors, legal know your rights. So ELSC, European Legal Advice Centre, there, one to bookmark their website, report your incidents there. If you need legal advice, you've got the Association of Muslim Lawyers. We've got the email within that link as well. So we ultimately just want to make it as easy as possible to find a single source and space for Muslim students to engage, because Muslim students don't have a group. I mentioned this at my teach out today in Liverpool. Every other kind of group can fall into one kind of existing group on these encampments. Muslim students, because of all these issues that we've alluded to, cannot, for sake of principle, for sake of values, for sake of discomfort, and for sake of lack of familiarity and things like that. They don't want to compromise. And so this space will ultimately provide a safe space for Muslim students to get involved in pro-Palestinian activism on campus, inshallah. Abu
Bakr, yes, please. Your thoughts on this Muslim Students for Palestine network.
Yeah, I think for the past 6-7 months, we've seen an absence of leadership from anyone, from any organization. And I think as a collective Muslim community in the UK, we have to take responsibility for this. We can't just turn around and point the finger to one organization or one individual or or ISOCs, etc. We really have to look in the mirror and reflect how we've came here and how we move forward now. I think this, inshallah, will be the first step in revitalizing a Muslim student movement that was really thriving until about 2020, revitalizing that movement and bringing it back to the forefront of student politics. And most importantly, I really want to send a message to everyone listening to this, that once this is over, once inshallah the genocide in Gaza is over, and once these encampments are over and we've achieved our aims of divestment, do not forget the student movement. These are the places where the future Muslim leaders are made, and unfortunately widely ignored. There are Muslim student activists who put their hearts and souls into these movements, and unfortunately, too often they're laughed at and dismissed by people. They're like, "Why do you care so much? ISOC politics isn't that deep. NUS isn't that deep." But these institutions are how we mold and shape our future leaders. So I really want to ensure that this is the first step, the real first step into refocusing our community's attention to the student movement. And I really hope that the events and the lack of movement post October 7th really opens the eyes to everyone that we haven't done enough, and now is our opportunity to do better and create a long-lasting, sustainable infrastructure where Muslims feel empowered and confident in speaking up about politics, which they hold deep in their heart. You're muted.
I've muted myself. I pray this does happen. I think these last 7 months have been a wake-up call for all of us, actually, and many of our institutions have realized that there is a need to be ready and to be active. So thank you very much, and all the work that you guys do at the Muslim Vote. I would like to turn to Mohamad Habehh and ask him about the abandoned Biden movement in the United States. I mean, we hear a lot about this, and we hear that in some of the swing states of the United States, Biden could potentially lose those seats, and the Muslim vote may be quite decisive in that loss. And of course, Gaza has become a lightning rod for those Muslims who want to show their disapproval, really, with the Democrat Party. I mean, there is a counter view, which is that when it comes to elections, people are going to look at Trump and make a decision, hold their nose and make a decision to vote Biden. How sustainable do you think the abandoned Biden campaign is? And does the student activity, does it feed into this movement against Biden?
I think when we talk about the current state of American politics, the American public as a whole is disturbed that for the past 4 years we were not able to come up with better candidates for the presidential election. The fact that for the second time in a row now, we have two of the most unpopular candidates ever running again is something that we find very harmful to our society, and this is all across the board. Many of you may know that Biden, or as he's been referred to, Genocide Joe, isn't very popular amongst all Americans, and his stance on Gaza has been a detriment to our community, and has been a detriment to his polls. And we've seen now that Biden, because of the ongoing protests, because of the constant protests to him, won't even show up to a college campus. He doesn't go to events where there are more than 10 people in the room. And there are reports that he even needed to hire a new security company because of how pressured he's been by not only the student movement, but the greater Palestine movement. Now, the Abandon Biden campaign is one aspect of this, but the one of the most telling things is the Uncommitted campaign. As many of you may know, we're now in primary season, and almost in every single primary where people from the party of Biden, from the Democratic Party, are going out and voting, are voting to show who they support, have been coming out as uncommitted. Now, the Uncommitted campaign is a grassroots movement that is taking place in states across the United States, across the country, are voting in a protest vote against Biden. Just a few days ago, here in Maryland, right next to Washington D.C., we saw over 10% of the vote, over 50,000 people in a primary election come out saying that they are not committed to voting for Biden in the upcoming election. And we've seen this even in the swing states, in states like Michigan, in Minnesota, in Pennsylvania, all across the country. We're seeing tens of thousands, in some cases over 100,000 Americans going to the polls just to say that they will not commit to Joe Biden. Now, this is something that Democrats across the country are seeing, and they're starting to change their tunes because of. It was no secret that even before October 7th, that the Democratic Party leaned towards Palestine, and that Generation Z, Gen Z, and millennials leaned towards Palestine. But in the past 7 months, we've seen the American public, especially the youth, especially the minorities, especially the Democratic Party, have become much more pro-Palestine, and not only stand against what's going on in Gaza, but they want to see not only the U.S. take back arms from Gaza and stop arming Israel during this moment, but they also are, in some cases, are calling for sanctions. They want Israel sanctioned for the ongoing genocide. So we've seen this shift here in the United States, and it's something that won't only be felt in the presidential election, but it'll be felt in every single election where the incumbent refused to support Palestine, refused to support the people of Gaza, and in some cases even participated and perpetrated the ongoing genocide. So we are seeing this movement, and it is growing, and it is something that will continue. Many of you may know that in this summer, the parties, the Republican and Democratic Party, will be having conventions to give their support to their candidates. We see that there are already plans from grassroots organizations, grassroots organizers around the country that will be protesting these conventions in a rebuke of the candidates, and a rebuke of their foreign policy as regards to Gaza. And this is the American way. The last time something like this happened was during the Vietnam War, when the American public gathered in Chicago to rebuke the president at the time, and to call for an end to the Vietnam War. And we see now the Democratic National Committee convention will be in Chicago, and the community there, which is a community that is full of Muslims. We have, they call it Little Palestine, and in some areas we also have our Pakistani and our Indian brothers and sisters as well. Chicago and Illinois as a state have many Muslim Americans. We see now that there are plans for a huge protest there to stand against the current foreign policy, and this is more and more evidence of the changing currents here in the United States and the changing stances with regards to Palestine.
Thank you very much, Prophet Mohamad, and thank you very much for your time today. I would like to ask one final question, actually, to Rabbi Mohamad Rabbani, and it's a question about motivation, because, of course, this genocide is ongoing, and there is a fear that fatigue will take over, and there is a fear that these encampments, at the moment, we've seen across the United States and across Britain and across Europe and the world, after a while, when potentially the outcomes are not so lucrative, the outcomes are not so forthcoming, we can get weighed down. I mean, I'm already seeing some indications of some fatigue when it comes to boycotts and protests. How do we keep ourselves motivated, Brother Rabbani? How do we keep going in these really dark times?
Jazakallah khairan, brother. The struggle is going to be a long one, and the result will come whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills the result to come. Allah commands us just to do our very best and to be consistent. Allah commands us, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, isbiru wa sabiru wa rabitu wattaqullaha la'allakum tuflihun. Believers, you need to be patient, you need to be consistent, and you need to almost outdo yourself and the enemy in patience. That steadfastness Allah is commanding us, and He says, stand guard, remain vigilant, and have taqwa of Allah, and eventually you will gain success. So Allah tells us He knows what the actual ingredient of victory is. He's revealing it to us. So that's the first thing that we need to do, that we have to understand the struggle is a long struggle. So if we are making this commitment and it's a superficial commitment, then we are going to get tired. And if it's a commitment that is emerging deep from our convictions and our moral obligation, our iman, then we will find the energy, because it's a spiritual energy as much as it is a physical and emotional energy. The second thing is, we have to keep our eyes on Gaza. We have to watch what the Palestinians are doing. Until the Palestinians have conceded their land, we can't give up. Until the Palestinian mothers have abandoned their homes, we have to keep going. Until the resistance has stopped fighting back and defending its people, its honor, and the blessed Masjid al-Aqsa, how can we stop? How can we find any way to just give up and throw in the towel? So that seriousness has to be there, and we take our inspiration from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. And of course, we're human. So what we have to do is also pace ourselves. What I found that helps is reminding ourselves through a few quick actions. Patience and prayer. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the Muslims, these are your secrets, these are the provisions. If you establish the prayer, you will have a direct connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you draw strength from that. You remind yourself that even if I'm tired, at the end of the day, Allah is watching me, He will reward me. If you find yourself that, we've been doing this for weeks and weeks, there's no result. When you're sitting there on the prayer mat, or you're reciting the Quran, you're making dua, you remind yourself that the result is in the hands of Allah. I don't control none of that. All I control is whatever Allah has given me, I have to do the right thing. So having a portion of salah, Quran, and dhikr and dua is very, very important in order for us to last the journey. And lastly is, if we make individual effort, it's not likely to last. So it's very important that we draw the motivation also from surrounding ourselves in an organized effort. We find other brothers and sisters who are like-minded, and we make a pact with them and work together in an organized way. These are some of the things I feel, inshallah, that will help us keep ourselves motivated. We have seen families in the work that we do, at least, brothers who've been sentenced to life imprisonment. There are some brothers who are still suffering in Guantanamo Bay. It's been like 20 years or more, and their families have been struggling. There are cases in America where Palestinians were arrested and sent to prison. For example, the Holy Land Foundation cases. They're still there in prison. Their families are still steadfast, continuing. The case of Afia Siddiqui, she's still in prison. Their family, the community is still persisting. So we have to take inspiration from things like that and try and keep ourselves motivated. May Allah give us all tawfiq.
I mean, Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much. And it's really been a fascinating conversation with so many expert guests today. And I suppose the idea behind today's show was to put a spotlight on student activism, especially here in the UK, and to help students, inshallah ta'ala, formulate strategies and plans, and to show them that the community is there to help. We have organizations like Cage and so many organizations in the Muslim community that are ready to help. So inshallah, maybe this is a small effort to bring together, to knit together, to coordinate some of our activities so that we can help the students make a difference and make a change, and that students know that they're not alone. So I would like to thank my guests today and thank them really dearly for their contributions. They've been really amazing, and forgive me to all my guests for not giving you enough time. We just had so many great contributions to go through. There is a link tree, Muslim students for Muslim students for Palestine, and you can get lots of information, lots of knowledge. There's a knowledge base on it. Email addresses and a form if you're a student and you want to get involved with activities on your campus, but you don't know where to start. Brothers and sisters like Ayo, brothers like Ayo and sisters like Layla and Abu Bakr, brothers like Abu Bakr are here to help you. And there are multiple organizations that are working on student campuses. So we want to knit it together, and we want to make sure that all students know that we are here to help. I'd like to thank our scholars for contributing to the campus activities, and it's really been wonderful to see people like Shaykh Fuad attend on a regular basis, actually on a daily basis, attend these encampments, and all of the work that's going on behind the scenes to inshallah ensure these activities are successful. So thank you very much. I appreciate very much all of our viewers for coming today, for attending today's session. This broadcast will be on our channel, so you'll be able to access it afterwards, and we'll turn it into a audio podcast as well, and so you'll be able to access it on the Apple and Spotify platforms. And Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much for all your efforts and all your time today. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.